Hi guys, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist. In this occasion I wanted to talk about the importance of precious metals, gold and silver. Here in the table you see a bit of jewelry, of gold jewelry. Sometimes it's not completely understood why it is important from a survival and preparedness perspective to have at least some of your savings in gold and silver and precious metals. Maybe you're not going to be buying jewelry today. It makes more sense to put some of your money in silver and gold, silver eagles or Krugerrands or some other bullion coin instead of jewelry. But the principle is still the same. Why is it that it's important? Why is it that precious metals are important, especially from a survival and preparedness perspective? Sometimes you see people say, well, that's not important for me. Gold and silver, that's just shiny metal. It's of no use, of no value to me. I don't care about it. I cannot eat it. I cannot shoot it. I cannot use it as a tool. Instead of doing that, I invest. You know, the word invest is used a lot. I invest in tools which I'm going to be selling for a fortune after the end of the world or something like that. You know, well, it's first of all, none of this is an investment. It's a form of saving. An investment is something that actually creates a profit for you, and that's not the case of gold and silver. If you buy real estate and that real estate is put to use and it's creating a rent, it's making profit for you, that's actually an investment. Gold and silver are not investments unless you work it in a certain way, buying and selling, which is not what's the purpose of this video. It's a way of protecting what it is that you have, okay? So for example, a few months ago, silver was $40 each, right? Each one of these costs about $40, 40 bucks. Now it's around 29 and people are freaking out and, well, I wasted my money on gold and silver because, well, that's not the idea, that's not the purpose. What it is that I do as of today, before, if it was 40 bucks, maybe I could afford one. Now that it's a bit cheaper, I buy two of them, right? That's the way you should be thinking about it. Putting aside a percentage of your work, of your effort into precious metals and preserving it. Don't freak out over dropping or raising a few bucks, give or take, or whatever it is that it is. Historically speaking, gold and silver have always maintained, within a certain margin of course, but always maintained their purchasing power. And it's been this way for thousands of years, and it's not likely to change at all. Especially if you look at it in the time frame I'm talking about, I truly mean thousands of years, folks. In the Roman days, an ounce of gold, not silver, an ounce of gold bought you a very finely made toga, sandals, and a belt. Very finely made stuff which you would use to dress elegantly. Today, with a gold ounce, which is about 1,600 bucks, you still buy yourself a very fancy suit, nice leather shoes, and a nice leather belt as well. It's in back in the day, an ounce of gold bought you a finely made pistol, flintlock pistol, when they were first being made, handmade stuff. That ounce of gold today still buys you a top of the line 1911 the type of pistol, maybe even cheaper if you go for the cheaper stuff, you know. So within a certain margin, it maintains its value. And okay, what I have here in the table is some family heirloom stuff, some gold that belongs to my family, to myself and my wife, and we're probably gonna be passing it over to our kids when we're not here anymore. And what I'm talking about until now is theoretical. Now I'm going to be showing you actually how it is that things turn out. In my book, which I don't have it right here, it's called The Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse, I mentioned that it's maybe a good idea to have, if you find it for a good price below the price of the actual precious metal content, buying some junk gold and silver is not a bad idea. And I mentioned how you could cut links of a gold chain and sell small pieces of it. Well, surprisingly enough, my wife, she ended up receiving this bracelet you see here. And this bracelet you see here belonged to her great grandmother. And her great grandmother had this chain, gold chain, but back in the day when she had it, it was much longer. It was about this size, Okay, it was actually a necklace. It was a necklace chain, much longer, but she was in Italy during First World War, and during those times it was pretty tough, and so as to survive, she would cut links, small links of this chain, and buy food with it during First World War. All right. If you look closer, let me show it to you. If you look at it a bit closer, you can actually see that these links can actually be pulled apart without breaking them. You can disassemble just pulling apart with fine pliers. You can open it and not break it and close it back. And she would sell small pieces of this gold chain so as to buy food. By the time this chain reached my wife's grandmother, it was much shorter. And what my wife's grandmother did, since it was too short to be a necklace anymore, she used what was left of that family heirloom and made a bracelet with it. She sent that piece of gold chain that was left, this piece of gold chain that you see here, she sent it to a jewelry store and had these ends installed, right, so as to make a bracelet. And this was her gift to her granddaughter, my wife. Okay, so you see how what I'm talking about here is not just theoretical stuff. I actually have a piece of gold here, of jewelry gold, that was used exactly the way I described a few years ago in my book. Okay, this other necklace belonged to her grandmother as well. And you see how it's almost a metaphor on its own. They would buy the long, thick linked chain, and you would sell what it is that you needed to get by. And the last thing you sold, the last thing you got rid of when you were actually more desperate, was the largest piece of gold itself, the metal itself, which is what had the most gold content. So maybe you just sold a few pieces of the link of the chain, and that was enough to get by, get through the tough times, and maybe you could spare the rest of the chain and the metal itself. Gold has been a form of currency, a form of protecting savings for thousands of years. That's not likely to change at all. This is actually why gold started as a form of jewelry. It was the way in which people ensured that they had at least some piece of saving, some piece of value with them at all times. If you just lost everything you had, but you managed to keep the clothes in your bags and maybe what was in your pockets and maybe what was around your neck or in your fingers, that's the last thing you had. And if you lost everything else, if you lost your home, if you have to evacuate or leave the country because of war in a hurry and you couldn't have anything else, at least you had that. So that's why, culturally speaking, people use gold as jewelry. That's why it's traditionally given as a gift for your loved ones, for your family members. It's the way in which you ensured that if you lost everything else, at least what you had on your body, that was at least something. Okay, think of it in the times in the Middle Ages when things were less safe, so to speak, when there was no well-organized police, where houses had no alarm systems and they could be broken into much easier. Think of times of even the peasants, where people weren't even allowed to own their own land. The land they worked belonged to someone else. If they could manage to save a bit of money and have something of gold, that was something of value that would be passed over to the following generations. You know, maybe a peasant would work his entire life and maybe just buy one of these rings, right? But at least it was something. At least it was a form of value that was stayed within the family or stayed with that person for as long as it was needed. This ring also belonged to my wife's grandmother. This ring belonged to my grandfather. Actually, he was a carpenter. He came from Spain during the war as well, during the Spanish Civil War. He came to Argentina looking for a better future for his family, and that's what you do. You don't leave because of yourself. Usually it's because you want something better for your kids, for the future generations. And he actually achieved that. He escaped Spain, left behind his parents and brothers, but at least he achieved what he wanted. He managed that his daughters, my mother and my aunt, they managed to go to school, study, go to college even, which is something unthinkable at that time in Spain, especially with the war and all that stuff. So that's what you do. You leave looking for a better future for your kids. And I remember when I was a little kid myself, and being with my grandfather, sitting in his lap, and I remember his his hands. He was a carpenter, so he had leathery hands, and he had this ring. And I remember actually touching his hands and touching this ring. During an accident, he lost these two fingers. He lost them because of a machine. And for a carpenter to lose a couple of his fingers and lose his trade in some way, it's a terrible thing. And I remember sitting in his lap and looking looking both of his hands, and when I touched his hand that was missing those fingers, he would bring it up and look at it, and sometimes a tear would roll down. And my grandfather, he was a pretty tough guy. He wasn't exactly delicate or anything, but rather than the pain of losing them, it's the emotional pain of losing that part of him, that dexterity he had. When the machine caught his fingers, he actually picked them up and went to the hospital, but they couldn't attach them back because at that time I suppose it didn't have the kind of medical advances they have today. So a carpenter, someone that isn't exactly into fashion or anything, but he had his gold ring as well, my grandfather. This had a stone here. This had a small stone here, which is now lost because being someone very used to working with hands, he bumped it against stuff all the time, so it got lost. I suppose it broke and it came off. But it's still maybe my most prized possession, the last thing I'd get rid of, my grandfather's ring. My grandmother, she's 87 years old, and she gave it to me, and one of those things. Today, folks, it's Christmas, and I wish you all a happy Christmas, and I hope you're all surrounded by your loved ones and that you had a great day. It seems to be a very materialistic topic, talking about gold and silver, yet at the same time it's some of those things that have value beyond the metal content, the precious metal itself. It's something that it's close to family, close to what we really are about, right? So on one side, you talk about precious metals as a form of value. On the other side is family heirloom and stuff that we have close to our hearts. So guys, I hope you had a great Christmas. I honestly hope you had a great day. I wish you all lots of luck, and see you all in our next video. Take care.